Hello, in this video we're going to look at the banking section of QuickBooks, probably one of the most important parts of the whole of the QuickBooks experience. Stay tuned.
I'll be there to catch you if you fall. I can make it brighter when it starts. I told him I would do it all for you, and I know you do it for me too. I can be a fighter if you want. I can be a fighter. I can be a fighter if you want. I can be a fighter if you want. All the way that I feel, yeah, I know that it's real, 'cause I can get him out of my head.
Hello, my name's Aaron Patrick. I'm a trainer at QuickBooks and also a chartered accountant. So hopefully when it comes to answering your questions, helping you along, I should be able to have most of the answers. Now for today, what we're going to look at is the banking. I'm going to keep it really simple, really straightforward. I'm going to do a guide for the banking and walk you through how to do banking in best practice. So hopefully, fingers crossed, you get the most out of banking, and that's where you can save the most amount of time within QuickBooks. So without further ado, let's get straight in there and let's have a look and see how we can improve our banking experience. Okay, so if you can see from our client that we've got on screen now, this is just a demo client, but as you can see, it's starting to come to shape and we can see that we've actually got items sat in that bank account. To get to the banking section within QuickBooks couldn't be any simpler. Basically, we're going to go over to the banking section there and we're going to have a look and see what's going on. Okay then, so what I want to do now is look and explain how the banking feature works in QuickBooks. Now, first of all, it's about getting data into the banking section, and there's two main ways to do that. The quickest and easiest way to get your banking data into QuickBooks is to connect your bank directly to QuickBooks itself. That means every time a transaction appears on QuickBooks, it's then going to go directly into QuickBooks itself. We're going to have a look how that works. So now in the banking section, on the right hand side, it's giving me two options. The first one is add account and the other one is file upload. If I use the add account button here, it's going to give me an option now to have a look at the 8 most popular bank accounts at any point in time. Now there's way more than those 8 accounts that are showing there. As an example, if I start typing in NAT for nationwide, you'll notice that there's 1,410 results on the word NAT alone. So chances are the type of bank account or the bank account you're looking for is going to be accessible within QuickBooks. Even the most obscure bank accounts are there as well. Things like Coots, bank accounts like Coots are there. You've got the new ones like Revolut. Now to connect the bank account, it couldn't be any easier. If I was just going to use one of these bank accounts that are on the front screen, let's just choose NatWest for example. As soon as I click on it, it's going to tell you what that particular bank account needs and how you're going to get that data in. So the connection here is really straightforward. It's telling me here that basically it's going to ask me, am I okay to connect my NatWest to my QuickBooks Online? As soon as I go through, it says I've got consent for 90 days. That's due to the new open banking initiative. That means that we can only keep a connection for 90 days at a time. But that's a security measure. That's in case you forget that it's actually been connected or anything like that. And it'll also tell you how it's going to gather details and what information is going to be needed. So all I need to do is press agree. Then it takes me directly to the NatWest one where I will just log in as I would do normally. The hard and fast rule is if you can log in online, you'll be able to make a connection to QuickBooks itself. Once I have got that connection in though, basically what it's going to do is it's going to make sure that my data is brought in on a day-to-day basis. It's going to make sure I get my data on a day-to-day basis. So every time I incur a transaction in the real world, you'll notice then that transaction will appear into QuickBooks for me. Now, what if I can't make that connection? Well, I'll still have the ability to get the data into QuickBooks. That's where the file upload option comes in here. As soon as I click on file upload, it then gives me the option of how I want to get the data directly in. Literally, all I do is download the file from the bank account, press browse, find the file, and it will step me through how to get that data in. Now, it doesn't matter how you get your data into QuickBooks, you're still going to see the same view. So this view that I've got just here is basically the view of what's going on. And it's worthwhile us exploring this view a little bit further. The first part is this bank card. Now the idea of this bank card is to make sure that we've got everything in place. This is going to help you decide or help you see what data is being put into QuickBooks. Every time you add a bank account to QuickBooks, you're going to get a different bank card view. And each bank card view is going to show you particular information. For example, here it's giving me a name. Now, we decided that was the business bank as the name, but we could have called it whatever we wanted to. We also have the balance of the bank itself. If we connected an actual live bank account, that live balance would have been in there. And then we have what's actually in QuickBooks at this point. So within this demo data, we've already added information in there, and that's the amount we've got there. Now, ideally, in an ideal world, you want your bank balance you're in QuickBooks to be exactly the same figure. If those two are the same figures, then we know we've done well and we know we've got everything included as we should. We've got how long ago it was last updated, so in this case 5 hours ago, letting us know how much we can rely on that data. And then we also know how many transactions are still to be dealt with. If you learn nothing else from this video today, the most important thing you take away from you is that number 34 figure here. This 34 figure here represents how many transactions QuickBooks has seen, either from connecting a bank account or from bringing in the data from a CSV file. But they're 34 transactions that QuickBooks haven't yet put into QuickBooks itself. And it's really important we understand that. That is one of the key takeaways in how QuickBooks works. A lot of times people see that 34 and they think their transactions have already been dealt with. But you have to do something with those 34 transactions first before they appear in QuickBooks. As an example, if I was to run my VAT return now, or run a set of accounts, or look at a trial balance, I wouldn't expect those 34 transactions to be in there. One of the best ways people have explained it to me in the past is they've explained it as like a dead man's zone. It's not actually a place where the data actually is. What you do with those 34 transactions, and in this particular example here, if I was to look down this list of transactions here and I was to count them all up, they'd come to 34. And that's because we have 34 transactions sat in our For Review tab. Now, our For Review tab is basically the place where our transactions sit originally, and then we decide what to do with them next. And we get two options. We want to move our transactions from the For Review to either Reviewed or to Excluded. So we're either going to put the items in from For Review to the Review tab, hence saying that they're going into QuickBooks, or we're going to move them from the For Review tab and move them to the Excluded tab. And let's walk through how that actually works. So what happens if I need to exclude a transaction? Well, it's really straightforward. I scroll down, I find a transaction I'm not interested in. So in this case, I'm going to put it into date format. And when I look at my date format, these two transactions up here, although they've come through the bank account, that's pre when I last actually did my set of accounts. So if I add these now, I'm going to end up duplicating the items. They would have been dealt with as opening balances. So all I do is I tick the items I'm not interested in, batch actions, and it gives me an option there to exclude selected. Now keep an eye on that 34 because we expect that number to go down. So as I press exclude, that number jumps from 34 to 32, saying that I've now dealt with two of the transactions. And if I jump into my excluded tab, I now have, in this case, 3 transactions, saying that transactions that I'm not bringing into QuickBooks. What about if you want to move your transactions from For Review to Reviewed? Well, it's really straightforward because QuickBooks itself is already got some data in there. And effectively what you want to think about is which data you've brought in there that is brand new to QuickBooks. And in that case, we're going to class that as items we're going to add to QuickBooks, or an item that's already in QuickBooks and we just want to put a big tick next to it to say we've seen that's come through the bank account and it's been matched. So basically you want to either add your transactions into the reviewed section or you want to match your transactions into the reviewed section. And let's look at that now. In this case, let's talk about those matched transactions. You'll notice on this list that every so often I have a green box around the items. That's because it's basically telling me that those transactions are already there. And what it's doing is it's looking through the information and it's going, I think I know what to do with these. I've seen these transactions. Am I correct in assuming what to do with them? And just to prove matters, what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate my screen. So if you notice on that list, you'll notice Vodafone was there. And that basically means that I can go in and match against those Vodafone transactions. So if I jump to my Vodafone supplier list, you'll notice there's 3 transactions there waiting to be paid. Now what QuickBooks is going to do is if I jump back into my banking section, it's asking me, and I even have an option up here for only recognised transactions. So let's get that list down to something more reasonable. and look at the items it's found. And it's found these 3 Vodafone transactions here. 1, 2, 3. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each one of these and I'm going to match them individually. So I'm going to press match, match, and match. And effectively what that's done, if I go to my supplier page now and I refresh the transaction, notice at the moment they're all outstanding. As soon as I press refresh, now I've refreshed, it's actually gone through and it's matched those transactions for me. And now I have nothing overdue, nothing open with this particular supplier. And if I was to jump into any of these transactions, I have a lovely little audit trail, because over here on online banking matches, it's telling me what that transaction was. So that's matching a transaction that's already in QuickBooks. Sometimes though, when it comes to matching a transaction, you might need to force QuickBooks to look into it. I've got an example of this here, and that is on my bank. I have a deposit here of £66,900. Now, what you guys don't realise, and what it's not easy to show, is that actually I've got 66,900 outstanding in sales, but the difference is they're 2 different items. So when I click into the transaction, notice how it expands and it gives me more options, and we're going to cover those more options later. But when I'm in the add section, I also have the find match section. So if I click on find match, it's then going to have an OR moment, and it's going to have a look and see that actually, if it looked at 2 different transactions, it could add these together. And in this case, it says 66,900. It could be made up of 6,900 from this invoice of Alex Blue and 60,000 from this Prince Edwin invoice there. And that's helping me go forward. So basically, it's already decided that those 2 look right, and all I need to do is press save. Now that transaction's been added to QuickBooks as well. As simple as that. You'll also notice that if I was to run a report for, say, aged debtors or anything like that, those 2 transactions have now been shown as paid, and I won't be looking to bring those or asking for those back. The next thing I want to look at now is, well, what about if you're looking at a transaction that you know is not in QuickBooks? So in my case, it's ones like this PC World here. Now with PC World, if I click into it, it's going to expand the transaction out. Now when it expands the transaction out, it's basically asking you for what information it needs to complete that transaction. In this case, it's really straightforward. It's basically asking you for the information you'll need if you're creating a brand new expense. As an example, if I was to go in and create a new expense now, and I went PC World. Now, if I effectively replicate that transaction and create that expense there and save and close. Now, when I look at those PC World transactions, it's now found that record and it wants to match against it. Because the expense was already there, it's now gone in and it said that I found that transaction for me, which is great. So I don't need to double count the transaction. I'm not worried about that. As soon as I press match, it then basically puts a stamp on that transaction to say it's happened. Now, if I just use this screen in its entirety and I add the screen from here, let's see what actually happens and what the difference is. So basically, when I click into the transaction, it's asking me, what do I want to add? Well, an expense sounds good to me. And it's asking me, do I want to put PC World? Yeah, that sounds fine. Category VAT. And all it's really missing is a tax code. All these other items that are around there are all if I want to add some extra complication to it. So classes and locations and everything like that, if they're there and you don't need them, you could just ignore them completely. Basically, what I'm going to do now is press the add button, and I've added that transaction directly to PC World. So if I was to go and bring up my PC World supplier, you'll notice I've got 2 transactions in there. And this is the big thing to understand about when you add a transaction from QuickBooks. You're not creating something completely different. If you remember, we created this £52.67. So I click into there, I can see exactly what I was created. It looks like a normal expense screen. At the top, I have the option to look at online banking matches, and you can see there's that transaction that came through the bank. This online banking matches is a great way of looking at an audit trail where you can see exactly what's going on. If I go and look at the one we added though from the bank account, the £33.99, you'll notice it looks exactly the same. All it's done is created that expense on your behalf. It stopped the need for you to have to go in, create the expense and come back again. Again, you have that online banking matches there, which is effectively going to be your way of being able to have an audit trail. Let me take a moment to talk about our sponsor, Boffix.com. Boffix.com. What they do differently is they have one subscription to offer all your business needs. It could be accounting, virtual office, call handling, IT services, legal or workspaces. They've got you covered. From an accounting point of view as well, they can get you options where you can actually look at fantastic deals, and they can even offer you QuickBooks subscription. If you want a QuickBooks subscription, these guys have got you covered. They'll be able to offer you the best rates and best deals you've got going, and offer you support on top of that as well. Also, if you are interested in them, you can look at any price point that you want. So whatever your business needs, whatever your financial commitments are, you can go along, put in the details you need, and then you can decide how much it's going to be worthwhile to you. So thanks for Boffix for supporting this video, and hopefully you guys can use them to be able to grow your business. So currently we looked at how we can match a transaction, bring it into QuickBooks. We looked at how we can add a transaction and bring it into QuickBooks. Now for the rest of these transactions, it's all about trying to clear them up as effectively and efficiently as possible. You'll notice that I've actually gone through and I've put this in what's called description order. When I put it in description order, that's going to make it easy for me to go through and do these in sections. Now, in this particular case, I've actually got a rule in place for WH Smith, because WH Smith, I've already defined what I want to happen. Now, rules are really straightforward and we'll cover them in a different video, but effectively at the top here, there's a rule section. And these are the rules that have been defined for me. So here I've got WH Smith and Audi. And basically what I'm saying is, if I see a rule there, I'm more than happy to go in and accept those transactions. Same with those other rules at the bottom. I'll go through, batch actions, accept. Now I'm just going through the last transactions that I've got available. So the thing I'm going to look at now is HM Revenue Customs. It's already found that one. It saw me pay that off in my VAT section. So it's given me the option to match directly. The ones that are left though, I can actually be a bit savvy with. So this British Telecom one here, I know they're all related to telephone expenses. So all I can do, or what I can do, is use my batch actions option to modify all three of them at the same time. So if I jump into modify, I can say they're all British Telecom. I can give them all the same category of telephone. In this case, I'm even going to say they're landline. And I'm going to apply 20% against them. All I need to do now is press apply and add, and all three of those transactions have now been added to QuickBooks. Notice now I'm down to 8 transactions, £63,000 in QuickBooks itself. Now what I'm going to do is deal with these other expenses, but again I'm going to be a bit more savvy. Instead of going into each individual one, I know that BP, Shell and Tesco is all related to fuel. So why don't I use that batch actions option, change the category to motor running expenses, apply some 20%, apply and add, and they're added as quickly as that. As quick as that, I've added 6 transactions. I know they're all different suppliers, but because they're relating to the same thing, I can quickly go in and add them nice and straightforward. I've got 2 more left now. First one is cash banked. Well, if I click in my cash banked, all I need to do now is add a transfer to my petty cash. Notice how I'm basically dropping down from an add button to a transfer. If I use transfer instead of just add and put it to petty cash, it eliminates all the VAT issues, and also make sure that if I've got connected to the other side, it's going to add that correctly for me. So I can add that transaction. Finally then, on my screen, I've got PC World. Now the only reason I've left this one is because it's slightly more complicated, and that's because we've also bought something that's actually capital related. So there's some capital item in here and also some computer expenses as well. But it's really straightforward because if I click into the transaction, I get the option to split down the bottom. So if I split it, I then get to go in and I get to make sure that some of it's computer running costs, some of it computer additions. All I need to do then is split accordingly the 2 amounts. Save and add, and those 2 transactions have been added to QuickBooks nice and easy for me. But split them between the 2 that I would expect to see. And that's all that I've done. Basically, now that I've got to the all done section there, my bank account has finally been added. And all my transactions are either sat in the reviewed columns or in the excluded column. I've got nothing left in for review. I get a nice big tick. I got £62,000 in QuickBooks. Hopefully I've got a bank account balance at the same figure. So now I'm really happy. What I can also do is jump into the dashboard and you'll see my dashboard's been updated as well. That's telling me the same figures. So as soon as I log in, it's going to prompt me, have I got something to do with my bank account? Is there something I need to keep up on top of? The most important thing and the way you get real-time information into QuickBooks is keeping that review tick there. That means all that data is going to the right place. That all means all that data has been dealt with. What I can also do in here is I can have a look at my petty cash. And you can see that's that bank transfer that I did, £285, which was basically the difference of what I had left in there, £300 and a £15 expense. So that's it. That's a real quick look at banking. Now it gets more complicated than that. There's more things we want to add. There's more things we want to look at. We want to make sure we can get complex transactions and how to deal with them. If you're going to throw multi-currency in, there's things you need to look out for and everything else. But there's a real simplified way of looking at it. That's our first lesson. So hopefully you can see that banking is something that's really straightforward. And as much as you can put, as much data as you can put in there and as much you can keep onto it, you're going to make your life easier. We touched on rules a little bit there. They are really, really essential for making your life super easy in terms of getting data in. I'm going to have a look at rules later in another episode. But banking itself is all about getting that data into QuickBooks. I highly recommend you connecting a bank account if possible. If not, just add that data in, get it onto QuickBooks, and you're going to make your life easier. Banking is by far the best way for you to save time. If you can add your bank account there, if you can get everything in, you're going to be able to make your life a lot easier. It also means that you're going to be able to match things as you go along, keep your accounts up to date, and nice and clean and tidy. Because that data's coming in, it makes it a lot easier. Don't forget, we've shown you how to add a bank account here, but it's not just bank accounts you can add. Credit cards, PayPal, loan statements, anything that's got an online presence, you normally can go in and add it to QuickBooks itself. The more bank accounts you add to QuickBooks, the more time you're going to save. And it's a real quick and easy way to make sure that you're making efficient use of QuickBooks itself. Thank you for taking the time to look at this video. Hopefully you've learned quite a lot. Banking, like I said, is an essential part of it. We're going to keep coming back and forth to banking. We're going to make sure you get as efficient as we possibly can. But for now, thank you very much. My name's Aaron. I've been here to give you some training today, and I'll catch you in the next video. Goodbye.
I say yeah. I told him I can be a fighter if you want. I'll be there to catch you if you fall. I can make it brighter when it's dark, I told him I would do it all for you, and I know you do it for me too. I can be a fighter if you want. I can be a fighter. I can be a fighter if you want. I can be a fighter if you want. Oh, the way that I feel, yeah, I know that it's real, 'cause I can get him out of my head. I don't care what we do, everything's feeling new. Even if we stay in bed, my heart is saying yeah.